The flashbulbs were blinding, a staccato storm of white light that turned the Manhattan skyline behind her into a glittering, unreal backdrop. Claire lifted her champagne glass toward the crowd, the stem trembling slightly between her fingers, not from nerves, but from the sheer disbelief of being here. The rooftop terrace hummed with the murmur of New York's elite, venture capitalists in tailored suits, celebrities in dresses that cost more than her first apartment, journalists with recorders poised. Somewhere beyond the nearest cluster of guests, the gala's host had just called her one of the most inspiring entrepreneurs in the city. Applause thundered like a wave crashing against steel and glass. She smiled for the cameras, not because she was used to moments like this, but because she still wasn't. A year ago, she'd been lying on the cold tile floor of the 42nd Street subway station, the roar of a departing train fading into the tunnels, clutching a small brown package to her chest like it was the last thing keeping her alive. Her breath had been shallow, ragged, her knees bruised from the fall, her palms scraped raw. Commuters had streamed past without stopping, the soles of their shoes clicking against the tile. No one looked twice. That night she wasn't in silk and sequins. She was wearing a thrift store coat 2 sizes too big, the cuffs frayed, one sleeve torn at the seam. Her boots had thin soles that let the icy March wind cut straight through to her bones. The package she held was light, barely the weight of a sandwich, but inside was something she'd risked everything to get. Something that could either pull her out of 18 months of debt, eviction threats, and nights rationing instant noodles, or drop her even deeper into a hole she'd never climb out of. On that rooftop tonight, the champagne was chilled to perfection. In the subway then, her mouth had tasted of dust and adrenaline. She remembered the smell, metallic from the rails, faintly sour from the damp concrete, and the way her fingers had locked around that package, as if loosening her grip would mean losing her last chance. Someone at the gala called her name. Claire. Over here. A photographer waved her toward the red carpet backdrop, the corporate logos gleaming under perfect lighting. She walked toward him, heels clicking against polished stone, each step an echo of the ones she'd taken that night, running up the subway stairs 2 at a time, lungs burning, knowing she had only 18 minutes to cross the city before the man who'd given her the package would assume she'd run off with it. He wasn't the kind of man who gave second chances. No one here tonight knew that the woman in the backless dress, smiling beneath a cascade of lights, had once stood outside a brick warehouse with no sign, frozen in the doorway, wondering if she should run or step inside. No one knew that the success they toasted had started with a deal that could have gone very, very wrong. And as she raised her glass for another photograph, Claire thought of that night, the moment the first domino tipped, and how close she had come to losing everything before she had even begun. The package was slipping. Claire adjusted her grip, fingers numb from the cold seeping through her gloves. Around her, the subway platform vibrated faintly from the last train's departure. The station felt emptier than it should have been at this hour, the tiled walls echoing with her hurried footsteps as she made for the stairs. She had exactly 18 minutes. That's what the man had told her, his voice low, his eyes locked on hers like he was warning her about something worse than being late. He hadn't given his name, only an address, and a single instruction: don't let go of it. No matter what. As she reached street level, the wind sliced into her face, carrying the sharp scent of rain and exhaust. Yellow cabs streaked past, their tires hissing on wet asphalt. She tried to hail one, but none slowed. Her heart pounded as she checked the time on the cracked screen of her phone, 9:14 p.m. 16 minutes left. She started running, weaving between pedestrians, the package held close under her coat. Every few steps, she glanced behind her. Twice, she was sure she saw the same man in a gray hoodie, keeping pace half a block away. Her destination was across town, a warehouse near the river, the kind of place she usually avoided after dark. As she ran, she couldn't help thinking about the phone call that had led to this. 2 days earlier, her landlord had given her 48 hours to pay 3 months of back rent or get out. She'd tried everything, begging old clients for overdue invoices, pawning the last pieces of her mother's jewelry, even calling her ex, which had been its own humiliation. Nothing worked. Then came the number, slipped to her by a waitress at the diner where she sometimes got free coffee. "He helps people like you," the waitress had whispered, eyes darting to the door. "But it's not charity. It's work." When Claire had called, the voice on the other end didn't waste time with pleasantries. He gave her the meet-up spot, the time, and the warning, 18 minutes. Now, dodging through traffic, she felt every second dripping away. The man in the hoodie was closer. She turned sharply into an alley, her boots splashing through shallow puddles, heart hammering as she emerged onto another street. 10 minutes left. The warehouse finally came into view, 3 stories of faded red brick, a single metal door, no windows. A single bulb above the door flickered in the damp air. She reached for the handle just as a hand clamped down on her shoulder. She spun, the package nearly flying from her grasp. It was the man in the hoodie. His face was hidden, but his voice was calm, too calm. "You don't want to do this," he said. Her breath came in sharp bursts. "Who are you?" "Someone who's seen what happens to people who walk through that door," he replied. For a moment, all she could hear was the patter of rain on the asphalt, the distant wail of a siren. Inside the package was her only chance. Or her biggest mistake. She tightened her grip, pulled the door open, and stepped inside. The metal door slammed shut behind her with a weighty finality that made her flinch. The sound echoed through the dim interior, swallowed by the smell of oil and damp wood. A single bare bulb swayed from the ceiling, casting long, restless shadows across stacks of wooden crates. Somewhere deeper inside, footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. Claire's fingers tightened around the package as a tall man in a black coat emerged from between the crates. His eyes scanned her like she was both an opportunity and a problem. "You're early," he said, his voice smooth but edged with something sharp. "That's good. Means you value time. Do you have it?" She hesitated, glancing toward the door, but he noticed. "If you walk out now, you walk back into the life you were desperate to escape," he continued, stepping closer. "But if you stay," he let the pause hang heavy. "Things change. Fast." She pulled the small brown parcel from under her coat and held it out. He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he studied her face like he was measuring the weight of her desperation. Finally, he reached for it, and in that instant, the bulb above them flickered violently, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A loud thud came from somewhere behind the crates. Then another. Claire's pulse spiked as she stepped back, clutching the package again. She could hear the man's breathing, steady and calm, even in the pitch black. "Stay still," he murmured. The sound of wood splintering erupted from the shadows. Someone else was in the warehouse. Heavy footsteps pounded closer, quick and purposeful. Claire caught the faint outline of another figure, shorter, broad-shouldered, moving fast. Suddenly, a beam of light cut through the dark, coming from a flashlight in the newcomer's hand. It swept over her face, blinding her for a moment. "Hand it over," the stranger barked. Before she could react, the man in the black coat moved. In one fluid motion, he grabbed her arm and yanked her behind him. "You're late," he told the intruder. "And you're not on the list." The next seconds blurred, a crash of bodies against crates, the package nearly torn from her grip, the man in the coat shoving her toward a narrow metal staircase. "Upstairs," he shouted. She stumbled upward, every step rattling beneath her boots. The second floor was darker, colder, lined with dusty windows that rattled in the wind. She found herself in a small office space with a desk, an old phone, and a locked filing cabinet. Downstairs, the fight raged, thuds, curses, something heavy breaking. She tried to steady her breath, but a question burned in her mind: what's in this package that makes people chase it like this? Then, silence. The sudden absence of sound was worse than the chaos. A faint creak came from the staircase. Someone was coming up. Claire backed toward the far wall, her grip on the package so tight her knuckles turned white. A shadow stretched into the room, followed by the sound of slow, measured steps. But when the figure emerged, it wasn't the man in the coat. The figure stepped into the dim light spilling from the cracked window. It was a woman, mid-30s, sharp features, dark hair tied back. Her coat was dusty, but her boots gleamed like they'd just been polished. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a place like this. Claire froze. "Who are you?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she scanned the room with quick, precise movements, her eyes lingering on the locked filing cabinet before finally landing on the package in Claire's arms. "You have no idea what's in there, do you?" she said, her voice low and steady. Claire shook her head, unsure if admitting ignorance was safe. The woman took a step closer. "Good. Don't open it. Not here." She glanced toward the staircase. "And don't trust the man in the coat." Before Claire could respond, heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. The woman's gaze sharpened. "We're out of time." She pulled a small key from her pocket and tossed it to Claire. "If you want to survive the next hour, keep moving north. Find the old bridge. Wait for me there. And whatever you do." The door burst open. The man in the black coat stood there, chest rising and falling fast, his face shadowed but his eyes locked on the package. "Step away from her," he ordered the woman. The tension between them was electric, like they'd been on opposite sides for years. Neither moved. Then, from below, came the sound of splintering wood and breaking glass. More people were entering the warehouse. The woman's eyes flicked toward Claire. "Choose. Now." Claire's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The man's hand was outstretched, waiting. The woman's eyes urged her to run. Somewhere deep inside, instinct made the decision. She turned and bolted toward the narrow hallway at the back of the office, clutching the package and the key. Behind her, shouts erupted, his voice, her voice, and then the sharp crack of something hitting metal. The hallway ended in a fire escape. She shoved the window open and climbed out into the freezing night air, the city's distant hum mixing with the pounding in her ears. From here, she could see the faint silhouette of the old bridge in the distance. She started moving, every step echoing with questions. Who were they? Why did both of them want the package? And what would she find at that bridge? The wind cut through her coat, but she didn't slow down. She knew one thing for certain: she had just crossed a line there was no coming back from. The metal steps of the fire escape groaned under her weight. Claire kept moving, glancing over her shoulder with every second step. No one followed, yet. The city's night air was sharp enough to sting her lungs, but it kept her awake, alert. By the time she reached street level, the noise of the warehouse had faded into the distance. Only the woman's words remained, repeating in her head, "Don't open it. Not here." She rounded a corner and ducked into a narrow alley, its brick walls wet with condensation. Her fingers tightened around the package. It felt heavier now, almost as if it knew it was the center of a storm she didn't understand. She stopped under a flickering street lamp and stared at the small brass key in her other hand. It was old, scratched, the teeth oddly shaped, not for a regular lock. She turned it over, and something caught the light, tiny engraved numbers along the edge. Coordinates. Claire's pulse quickened. She pulled out her phone and entered them into a map app. The location was miles away, near the outskirts, right by the old bridge. Her stomach tightened. The woman hadn't been lying. A cold drop of rain hit her cheek. She looked up, the clouds were moving fast, blotting out the moon. Somewhere down the street, a car engine roared to life. Headlights swept across the alley's mouth. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, as a black sedan crawled past. The rear window lowered just enough for her to see the man in the black coat. His eyes met hers for a fraction of a second before the car rolled on. She didn't wait to see if it would stop. She broke into a run, weaving through side streets until her legs burned. When she finally slowed, she was standing under an overpass, the sound of rushing water below mixing with the distant echo of traffic. Her breath fogged in the cold air. She reached into her coat and pulled out the package. The brown paper was damp from her sweat. She hesitated, hearing the woman's warning in her head, and then she slid a fingernail under the tape. Inside was a small wooden box, no bigger than a book. It was smooth, polished, and carved with intricate symbols she didn't recognize. The lid had no hinge, only a small keyhole. The key in her pocket suddenly felt warm. Claire's fingers hovered over the keyhole. The box seemed to radiate a faint warmth, almost pulsing, as if it had its own heartbeat. A strange thought crossed her mind: what if opening it here changes everything? She shoved the key back into her pocket. Not yet. If the coordinates meant something, she needed to see the place first. She started walking, keeping to the shadows. Every passing car made her tense, every distant footstep made her glance back. The rain had picked up, soaking her hair and blurring the glow of streetlights. When she reached the edge of the city, the buildings gave way to warehouses and empty lots. The old bridge loomed ahead, its rusted beams stretching over black water. The wind here was colder, carrying the faint smell of oil and decay. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She froze, then answered without speaking. A man's voice, calm but sharp. If you value your life, turn around. That box isn't yours to open. The line went dead. She felt a chill creep up her spine. Someone knew where she was. Claire stepped onto the bridge, the metal grating rattling under her boots. The coordinates led to the very center, where a single street lamp flickered weakly. No cars passed here, it was as if the bridge had been forgotten by the city. She crouched and checked under the lamp post. There, taped to the metal, was a small envelope. Inside was a Polaroid photo, a picture of her apartment taken from across the street. The window was lit, curtains half drawn. She stared at it, her throat tightening. Someone had been watching her. A noise made her spin, footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching from the far side of the bridge. A tall silhouette emerged, the shape of a man in a dark coat. "You have something that belongs to me," he said, his voice carrying easily over the wind. Claire gripped the box tighter, her knuckles white. "Then you'll have to take it," she replied, stepping back toward the center of the bridge. The man stopped, hands in his pockets, and tilted his head. "If you open that, you won't live long enough to regret it." The wind howled between them, the gap narrowing with every slow step he took. The man's steps quickened. Claire's heart pounded in her ears. She backed toward the railing, the river far below churning black under the street lamp's flicker. "Last chance," he warned, pulling one hand from his pocket. She saw the glint of metal, not a gun, but a small silver key, identical to hers. "Why do you have that?" she demanded. "Because I was supposed to open it," he said, his voice tightening. "You weren't even part of this, until you stole it." The accusation made her skin crawl. "Stole it? It was given to me." He shook his head. "No one gives this. It chooses." Before she could process that, the sound of screeching tires tore through the night. A black SUV barreled onto the bridge from the far end, its headlights slicing through the rain. The man's head snapped toward the vehicle. "They're here," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He rushed forward, grabbing her arm. "If they get that box, neither of us walks away. Jump." Her eyes darted to the side, a maintenance ladder bolted to the bridge's edge, slick with rain. The SUV roared closer, doors opening before it even stopped. Claire yanked free from his grip. I don't trust you, she said. Then trust your odds, he shouted. Men in dark gear spilled out of the SUV, moving with terrifying precision. One aimed something at her, not a gun, but a launcher. A hiss. A thud. The pavement beside her exploded in a cloud of gas. Coughing, she stumbled toward the ladder. The man followed, but just as she reached the edge, a figure from the SUV lunged, catching her jacket. The box nearly slipped from her hands. In a burst of desperation, she swung the box upward, slamming it into the attacker's face. He crumpled, and she scrambled down the ladder, the icy metal burning her palms. Halfway down, she looked up. The man was at the top, blocking the others, shouting something she couldn't hear over the river's roar. Then he turned, leapt onto the ladder, and they both descended into the shadows beneath the bridge. The moment their boots hit the muddy riverbank, he grabbed her shoulder. "If we survive the next hour, you'll understand everything," he said, pulling her into the darkness. They ran along the riverbank, the mud sucking at their shoes. Every splash behind them made Claire's grip tighten on the box. The rain blurred her vision, but the man never slowed, weaving between skeletal trees until the glow of the bridge was swallowed by darkness. Finally, he stopped before a rusted steel door set into the side of a crumbling warehouse. He rapped on it twice, paused, then 3 times more. A slot slid open, revealing a pair of wary eyes. The man muttered something too quickly for Claire to catch, and the door creaked inward. Inside, the air was heavy with oil and dust. Old machinery stood like forgotten giants, their shadows stretching in the dim light. A single bulb swung overhead, casting restless arcs across the floor. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to a warped wooden crate. She stayed standing. "I'm not taking orders from you. Not until you tell me what's going on." He sighed, dripping rain onto the concrete. "You think that package is your ticket out of debt? It's not. It's a death warrant, unless you use it exactly as intended." Her stomach tightened. "And how is it intended?" Instead of answering, he stepped to a workbench littered with maps, blueprints, and photographs. He flipped one over, revealing a black and white image of a man in a sharp suit, his face partly shadowed. Claire froze. She knew that face. She'd seen it smiling from billboards, in charity galas on TV, a billionaire philanthropist adored by the public. "What does he have to do with this?" she asked. The man's eyes narrowed. "Everything. He's the reason you're drowning in debt. The reason your sister lost her job. The reason people vanish without a trace in this city." Before she could respond, the steel door rattled violently. Voices shouted outside. The man's jaw clenched. "They found us." He shoved a set of blueprints into her hands. "If I don't make it out, you run to this address. And whatever happens," he pointed at the box, "don't open it until you're there." The door burst inward, and the warehouse flooded with blinding light. The light burned her eyes, the roar of footsteps pounding against the warehouse floor. Figures in black tactical gear poured in, rifles raised. The man grabbed a wrench from the workbench and hurled it, shattering the bulb and plunging the room into fractured darkness. "Run," he shouted. Claire bolted, clutching the blueprints and the small box, weaving between rusted machines as bullets sparked against steel. She dove behind an engine block, heart hammering, breath sharp in her throat. Through the chaos, she saw the man grappling with 2 attackers, moving like a cornered animal. A hand seized her shoulder. She spun, smashing her elbow into the masked figure's face. He stumbled, and she tore free, sprinting toward a side door barely visible through the haze. Outside, rain fell in sheets. She slipped in the mud but forced herself up, the box still locked in her grip. Behind her, muffled shouts grew distant. Then, silence. She reached the edge of the docks, where a single street lamp buzzed. The address from the blueprints was scrawled on a peeling sign above a boarded-up office. She pried the boards loose and slipped inside. The room smelled of damp wood and old paper. In the center stood a desk covered in dust. She set the box down and hesitated, the man's warning echoing in her mind, "Don't open it until you're there." Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside was, not money, not jewels, but a stack of documents and a worn leather journal. The first page was a confession, signed by the billionaire. Names, dates, accounts, bribes, everything tying him to a web of crimes. Her pulse raced. If this got out, he'd lose everything. And if he knew she had it, she'd be hunted. A sound creaked behind her. She turned sharply, and froze. The man stood in the doorway, bleeding from a cut above his eye, but alive. "You made it," he said, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Why me?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because you've already lost everything," he replied. "And that makes you the only one who can't be bought." He stepped closer, placing a battered phone on the desk. "This number will leak it to every major news outlet in the country. But once you press send, there's no going back." Her hand hovered over the phone. Rain drummed against the roof. The man's eyes locked on hers, silently asking if she had the courage. Claire thought of the years of debt, the sleepless nights, the faces of those crushed under his power. Then she pressed send. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. She exhaled slowly, a strange calm settling over her. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest lifted, not because she was safe, but because she'd finally fought back.